I think it's just about that time, 1 o'clock. So I want to welcome everyone to today's session, Developing and Measuring the Impact of Quality Inclusive Teaching. My name is Penny McCormick. I am the Chief Academic Officer for ACUE, and I am excited to share the power of pedagogy with you today. Meghan, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Meghan Snow. I'm the Executive Director of Analytics at ACUE, so I lead our program evaluation and research efforts.
And I am Deane Sorcinelli. I'm a Professor Emeritus and the Founding Director of a Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I also served as the Associate Provost for Faculty Development. I also was a first-generation student and benefited enormously from an undergraduate education experience at a state college, now a university. Glad to be here.
Terrific. So as good educators, we thought that we would start by asking our audience a question and getting some information from you. So you can see our question up on the slide. We're wondering if you might share with us the top 3 areas where you believe you need to spend or pay the most attention in order to ensure that you're on success, you're on the trajectory to success to meet your student success goals. So please go ahead and follow Angelica's directions to reply.
The poll will be live for 1 more minute, so get your votes in now.
All right, so it looks like we had quite a large number in focusing on student retention, almost equal, improving pass rates in introductory courses, closing institutional equity gaps, improving teaching quality is up there, which we all are pretty happy to see. And then a little bit less, but still paying good attention to effective and comprehensive student instructional supports. And as I read this, I'm happy to say that I think today's session will be really, really helpful to many of you. So thanks for being participants in the poll. Angelica, would you go to the next slide? So this image for us represents what most institutions, not all institutions, are putting in place or plan to put in place as far as strategies to reach their student success goals. Things like first-year experience or undergraduate research in high impact practices, data systems where they can produce predictive analytics that really help or are meant to help instructors and advisors meet students' needs in a better, more effective way. Things like guided pathways and advising that help to ensure students have clear goals and have a clear pathway to meet those goals. And the point of the slide for us is, first of all of these strategies make good sense. But on the whole, they generally involve staff and work that's done outside of the classroom, outside of our online courses, and generally not involving faculty. And for us, leaving instructors out of major efforts, right, to improve student retention, persistence to graduation, graduation rates, misses an opportunity to impact student success. And for us, not just a simple opportunity. So it's not something that I would add around the circle, but rather what we view as a foundational opportunity to impact student success. I believe if we think now back to March of last year, if it wasn't already clear to us, right, that teaching and learning was the foundation of our work, during that spring, it became clear because for most of us, for most of our institutions, the only thing that remained constant was that interaction between faculty and instructors in the classroom, or what ended up being the case during the global pandemic, online. Would you put the next slide up, Angelica? So the way we use this image to represent that is putting the teaching and learning, the classroom, at the center of this circle, around recognizing the strategies and the importance of the things that we can do to meet our student success goals. But as luck has it, there's a second catch. And that catch is that while our faculty are discipline experts in their research processes, most have had little and sometimes no preparation to teach. In other words, they haven't been taught the evidence-based, research-based practices that we know research has shown improve student engagement and student learning. And so with that in mind, we understand that the challenge we have to improve the quality of teaching across our campuses and our universities means that we need to prepare most, if not all, of our faculty in those evidence-based practices, which is honestly why ACUE began our work to begin with. We worked alongside experts, scholars in teaching and learning, networks of faculty to do two things. One, identify what the core set of knowledge and skills is to be effective in the college classroom, and then to create a learning design for our courses that would not only help faculty learn effective practices, but actually be inspired to put them into action in their classrooms and their online courses. And as luck would have it, we learned a second really important lesson during that pandemic, and that was that all of our faculty need to be prepared to not only use those evidence-based teaching practices in our classrooms, but need to be prepared to use those same practices aligned to that same framework in their online courses. And so during what was, I'm sure, a challenging time for most of you, it was for us as well. I have to recognize that in the middle of the global pandemic, we were able to work with experts in faculty experts and folks with expertise in online teaching and learning to develop a second course aligned to the same framework, that core set of knowledge and skills that would help faculty use those practices effectively in an online environment. And so, Angelica, if you would click and give us that signal that, actually go back to the slide there, a signal that says, look, back to the other slide, please. Thanks. Signal that helps all of us know that both formats allow faculty to effectively reach students, to engage them and deepen learning for our students to meet those student success goals. The next slide. Thanks, Angelica. Now, I would love to be saying, you might be turning to your neighbor right now, but I can't say that. So what I need to say instead is, don't turn me off. I'm on the right track. We're getting to it. This session's about inclusive practices, and that is indeed where we're going. And I'm excited to share with you right now that evidence-based teaching practices on the whole are inclusive teaching practices. In simpler terms, good teaching is inclusive teaching, especially when done with the intentionality to create that inclusive environment in the classroom and to support equitable learning opportunities. So to explicitly demonstrate that, though, we had an academic expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion work to show the specific links between what the inclusive teaching literature is calling for and the practices in our courses. And so we will put a link to this document right here in the chat for you to get into. But just to give a couple of examples, the inclusive literature calls for the need for interaction between you and your students in an online environment, as well as interaction with one another. And so our courses are we have a full module on how you can use groups to engage in active learning, as well as how you can send a welcome video or set up a discussion forum to allow your students to get to know one another and to get to know you. The inclusive literature calls for opportunities for students to practice what they're learning and the skills they're learning before there's a major assessment or major assignment. And so we work to include the ability to create formative assessments, quizzes, exit slips, so that both students and faculty can know from the results of those more low stakes events where they're doing well and where they might need to do a little bit more work. And then finally, a key concept, the inclusive literature calls for attention and to help students better understand the concept of growth mindset, that indeed one can become smarter with hard work and the willingness to try a variety of strategies for learning. And so we work in our modules to help faculty teach students what a growth mindset means, and that indeed part of a growth mindset is helping students understand that struggling when you're learning is normal. And so what that really allows students to understand is when they hit a place where they're really struggling, instead of thinking, gosh, maybe I don't belong here, or maybe I have to think about dropping out, instead they think, maybe I need to get some help. Maybe I need to try some different strategies in order to meet with success. Mary Deane, I wondered if maybe you want to share just a couple of thoughts on the links between inclusive teaching and evidence-based teaching.
Yes, thanks, Penny. Inclusive teaching, I think, is an explicit and intentional inclusion of all the students into our disciplines. And that comes through our course design, our pedagogy, and our assessment, as Penny illustrated. And so we can foster equitable outcomes through clear and well-designed course goals, through classroom discussions where students are engaging with diverse peers, and through fair assessments. And I honestly can attest that ACUE has developed and curated some really excellent resources for inclusive teaching, because I'm taking one of their courses right now. And given that experience, I know that teaching and learning can be an agent for positive change, but we need to support our teachers to get started on the kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion work we all need to do to build more inclusive classroom environments.
Thanks, Mary Deane. Angelica, would you go to the next slide? So I'm so excited today to share with you that when you prepare faculty in those evidence-based teaching practices, you're also preparing faculty to start to create inclusive learning environments, to make learning opportunities more equitable for their students in their classrooms. In other words, you're employing a single strategy that will help you not only realize your retention, your persistence, your graduation rate goals, but also will make for that more inclusive environment that allows you to start to narrow the institutional equity gaps that often exists on most of our campuses today. And certainly we're part of the set of goals that all of you said you were looking to meet in order to, again, meet your broader student success goals. But before I turn this presentation over to my colleagues, I thought it might be best for you to actually hear from students, hear the student voice about why evidence-based teaching, inclusive practices, and why and what they mean to them in their learning environments. Could you play that video, Angelica?
An inclusive course environment looks like to me where all beliefs are shared and equal, where we're all welcome no matter where we come from, no matter what we look like, no matter our beliefs.
An inclusive environment to me looks like an environment that everyone feels welcome. Everyone feels like they can take something away from this class.
I think inclusivity comes first and foremost from treating every individual with the humanity that they inherently possess and the respect that that humanity deserves.
If everybody's given the same opportunity and they're treated the same, everybody can have a great outcome.
Including everyone's perspectives, encouraging participation between students, between the professor and the students, having people involved, communicating with each other. That creates an inclusive learning environment, and it's conducive with greater knowledge and greater gain in the classroom.
In my mind, you simply can't beat the student voice. How inspiring. So I'm excited to turn the presentation over to Mary Deane and to Meghan, who are going to talk about linking those practices to actual data to show that we can, through these practices, meet those student success goals that you're all working so hard to meet. So Mary Deane, you want to take us down that path?
Sure. So these are wonderful student voices, and they clearly can guide us. But, you know, reflections on the kind of teaching and teachers they've experienced or they're hoping for just isn't enough. And so it seems to me the lever for change that we have here is making sure there is evidence on the table. You know, what is the data saying to us about students feeling engaged and included in the classroom? And so we're going to do another video clip in a few seconds, and it's the Dean of the Graduate School at Rutgers University in Newark, Haja Nia Henderson, and she's speaking to this question of data. Where's the evidence?
I think you know how it's worth the investment by looking at your data. And we've been, I think, from the very beginning, really eager and enthusiastic about what is the data going to show us. Of course, we couldn't predict what the data would say. We have seen faculty improve their courses, improve their teaching, improve their DFI and unsuccessful completion rates. We've seen this. And I think as an administrator, you want to be able to make the case not just to your faculty and your colleagues, but also to your students and their parents, that we are making an investment in our faculty, because our faculty will see hundreds, if not thousands, of our students across the life cycle of their career. It also helps us to make the case to our other stakeholders, including our legislators. Rutgers University Newark is using the public funds within its stewardship to advance teaching for thousands of students at the most diverse national university. That is, I think, an exceptional accomplishment, and we're very proud of that.
Sorry, I think that's a great video clip to give us that sense of what does the data say to us, and campuses clearly want that data. And so one of the aspects of ACUE that's really impressed me is that they've built very consciously built a culture where they're continuously asking, you know, what are we doing? How well are we doing it? How do we know? How can we use what we learn for improvement? And so I'm going to turn here to Meghan, who has led the effort at ACUE to answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Mary Deane. Great, Angelica. So like Mary Deane said, we have been committed to measuring the impact of the course since its inception. So knowing that we were developing a course, it's already based on research. All of these practices themselves are evidence-based practices. But in order to deliver on that promise of student outcomes, we knew that there had to be a sequence of events before that. So you can see the framework here on the slide. And how we measure this really in order. So are faculty engaged in the course? Is it relevant to them? Do they find it useful? Is it a good use of their time? Are they learning new practices? And then really most importantly, are they implementing them? In order to impact students, certainly it's the faculty behavior that has to change, not just what they know, but what they're actually doing in their courses. And subsequently, we're looking at what is the impact on students? How are students responding in the courses themselves? How are they engaging in their classes? How are they interacting with their faculty members? And then ultimately, how are they performing in those courses? Are they completing at higher rates? Are they earning higher grades? And after kind of we have these individual examples of improved courses, is the institution itself realizing greater retention, higher graduation rates? Ultimately, how is this impacting at an institution-wide level? You can see there's an image there, and I believe Christine will link it, but we've described this evaluation approach in a paper, Connecting the Dots, where we collect the data from, and really kind of the research that itself is based on. And so, Angelica, you can go to the next slide. So what we have found overwhelmingly, this is from a sample of more than 5,000 faculty. Because we survey the faculty at the end of each of the unique modules, you can see this is based on more than 143,000 responses. Faculty are finding the learning experience, the act of learning and implementing practices, reflecting on those practices, relevant to their discipline, to their department, to their institution type. Across all of those demographic variables, you can see 93% of those responses, faculty say, yes, this is relevant to me. They would recommend it to a colleague 89% of the time. And overwhelmingly 95% of these faculty say, this has helped me in refining my instruction. And so looking at the bottom, we ask, again, faculty, what are you learning? And at the end of a full course, you can see the average faculty completer learns 68 brand new practices. So new instructional strategies that they hadn't used before, they hadn't been exposed to before. And we ask what they might have learned more about. So certainly faculty go through a lot of experiences, different workshops, but what have they learned a little bit more about that they've refined? And that number is 85. So really honing in on 85 additional evidence-based practices. While they go through the course, they are actually implementing 25 new practices on average. So they are learning them in the module, implementing them in their courses, and then coming back to reflect on that experience. They have choice in what they choose to implement. So from that module, there's 5 to 8, sometimes more recommended practices. They choose one, they try it out, and they write about how it went. What were the successes? What were the challenges? How might you refine this for the future? And then we ask, which of these do you plan to implement in the future? So certainly recognizing that a single person cannot try hundreds of new practices in the course of one academic year. So which of these would you like to try in the future? And then there are ways that we support them in continuing to refine their practice, even after their course experience. So kind of revisiting these practices that they said they wanted to try, and helping them additionally kind of locate those resources again and refresh on what they might want to try after they've concluded the course. We can go to the next slide, Angelica. And so the culmination of this course experience is really, how confident are you now to implement these evidence-based practices? And this really comes from a combination of watching the videos in the course, seeing your students and yourself and your institution type, learning new things, having resources available, but then actually going and trying it. So that's having the experience of trying something new, seeing how students are responding, and then coming back to reflect on that experience. And all of that together throughout the learning design is really building the faculty's self-efficacy for implementing these new strategies. And you can see the before is just saying who was confident doing this before you started. And now at the conclusion of the course experience, the percent of faculty that report that they are confident after. Again, this is from across several programs. You can see it's based on just over 1,700 faculty responses, and really the nearly doubling across the board of the percent of faculty that feel confident really implementing these strategies in their courses. And then I want to make one comment, Angelica, before we switch, which is we're also asking faculty about their mindsets, which I think is particularly important when we're thinking about inclusive teaching and equity, because we ask faculty questions about their belief that all students can be successful, their role in helping students be successful in their course. And that also shows significant improvements of a great magnitude, just as you're seeing here. So the process of learning about these strategies, really trying them, sometimes being surprised at how effectively they work and how students are responding differently to them as a result of these changes in their practice, is also kind of having this cumulative impact of changing how maybe they're approaching their classes and all of their students and what they may believe is possible from a classroom of their students. And go to the next one, Angelica. And so when we're thinking about the faculty have changed their practice and they've really been reflective and they've tried all these new things, how are the students responding? So we look both at, like I mentioned, the student response in form of surveys as the faculty are really participating in the course, and then taking a longer look at how students are performing in the faculty courses over a period of 3 years. So we typically, our standard model is to look at the year before the faculty participated in an ACUE course, the year they are participating in that course, and then following up the year after they have completed to see how this improved pedagogy continues to impact their course outcomes. There are 3 examples here that particularly highlight where we've identified an equity gap being eliminated or just a specific finding for students who have been either underserved historically. One at Texas Women's University, where a course completion gap was eliminated for students taught by ACUE faculty from the year before to the year they were participating in the course. At Delta State University, we saw improved success rates, which are grades of A, B, and C, and lower DFW rates across a large number of their students, because of course, remembering how many students faculty teach in a given year. And so it really worked out that we were able to quantify the number of students who passed their courses who would not have otherwise. And for Delta State University, that meant 3% of their student body was really on track for a more likely graduation as a result of having passed their courses. And then most recently, we've published something about Broward College, which was a multi-year study involving several cohorts of faculty from our course, where we again were focused on looking at the demographic groups of students and the specific impact on them. And you can see there was a course completion gap was closed for Black students. There was a gap in passing rates that was closed for students who are Pell eligible. And across the board, student completion rates and grades were improved. And so across all of our studies, our institutions that we've worked with have been very diverse. The majority of our studies are from Hispanic serving institutions. And so when we think about the overall impact, it has really been great for all groups of students. And then we have some of these specific examples where we can highlight that we've been able to measure a more significant impact on students in certain groups. We can go to the next one, Angelica. And our last study I want to highlight is Rutgers University Newark, where we just heard from Tajania Henderson. This was a multi-year study we did in collaboration with CASE at CUNY. So they were the third-party evaluator working with us on this one. And here again, we saw that students were significantly more likely to earn grades of A, B, or C when they were taught by ACUE credentialed faculty. Completion rates improved. And specifically, just noting in this study, also at Broward College, we continue to see impact and often greater impact in the year after. So this study included faculty who had completed either 1 year prior or in some cases more than a year. And the effect isn't only when faculty are participating in the course and trying new practices, it is enhanced in the subsequent year. So as they continue to refine their practice, as they try things for the second or third time, not just the first, redesign some of their course documents, we're really seeing that there is continued, sustained, and again, sometimes amplified impact in the year after they've completed the ACUE course. You can go ahead to the next one. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Deane to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we've shared our research, both at conferences and in a special panel she'll talk about.
Great. Thank you, Meghan. This was in mid-2019. ACUE decided to launch an independent peer review of their evaluation findings. By then they had accumulated, I think, almost a dozen studies. And to do so, they convened a diverse and I think well-respected team. These are individuals, as you can see from the lineup. They have experience as academic leaders at various levels and institutions, foundations. Also, all of them are disciplinary scholars. You know, I want to note that ACUE shared all the results with us. I was one person on the team. From the evaluation framework, all the way that you saw, the connecting the dots, all the way to every single technical paper. As Meghan said, we were delivered this huge binder full of studies, but there was complete transparency. And we had complete independence in working together over a day and a half to review the findings. I also want to note that this was rigorous academic research. So it wasn't some in-company, scan of the literature. This was research that has been peer reviewed again after our findings and also presented at a range of higher education associations. And all of them, as you can see, ACE, AERA, ASH, POD, they're noted for their research and practice-based scholarship. And you will find links to the report that I'm talking about in your chat. The next slide, please. So what did we conclude? I think it's worth reading the whole report because we do review all of the studies and you have a sense of the comprehensiveness of the work. But we concluded that it was an impressive body of work with a range of depth and rigor that reinforces the link between faculty development, teaching improvement, and student learning. And this ACUE is on the forefront, along with just a couple of other studies that have been able to really link these things together. If you provide faculty professional development, it can lead to teaching improvement, which can lead to student learning, which Meghan's given you lots of evidence to that effect. So one more slide, please. The next slide. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to just chat a little bit about what I see as some of the benefits to academic leaders for considering this kind of a curriculum or building up your faculty professional learning teaching centers, whatever venues you have, why it's so important to focus on improving teaching to get to student learning. But a few things here. I think we now know that ACUE has furthered the scholarly evidence that we have that links professional development with teaching and student learning outcomes. So we actually now have evidence that instructors who participate in extended faculty development done well, like the ACUE courses and curriculum, that translates, that learning translates into their course materials, their approaches, their pedagogical approaches, and it can lead to student learning gains. It will lead to student learning gains. On the second point, I think there are few institutions that can match ACUE in the number and the wide range of studies they've done, the kind of staff expertise they have in assessment and evaluation, the resources they can bring to bear on the topic. But colleges and universities can create a campus partnership with ACUE and make such data and studies possible. They also can cite now a range of rich research that's been conducted by ACUE and do it with confidence that we know that these studies show impact and impact over time. I think one aspect of ACUE, one among many that I find really unique among external providers, is that they actively work to develop partnerships and networks for student and teaching success. So they actively reach out to the teaching center on campus, to the provost office, to the advising center, to the assessment and institutional research groups. So there's that active connection and networking. And I mentioned earlier taking a course with ACUE, and I'm in it right now. And I have to say, it's such a diverse group, not just by gender and race, but also where I'm working with folks who are adjuncts all the way to full professors, from the humanities to the sciences. We have a director of assessment in the course. We have a curriculum specialist. So these courses provide a community and a really rich environment for professional learning. And they'll also work with a teaching center or some unit that provides professional development to build communities on campus as you're going through a course. And finally, if quality instruction and student success and diversity and equity and inclusion are our institutional priorities, as they have to be, then the ACUE courses and curriculum, I think, sends a clear signal to everybody, from the central administration to instructors, that we are all committed to that goal. And on that point, I'd like to close the session with a video clip by Nancy Cantor, who is the chancellor of Rutgers University Newark, and you saw some of the impressive data coming out of Newark. And she really speaks to these institutional priorities of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if we could turn to her video as a closing remark.
When I look at our students, and we have extraordinary diversity, no racial or ethnic majority group, all kinds of faith groups, all kinds of cultures, all kinds of natural languages, heritages. When I look at our students and you see them in a room, you realize that if only we had a language to pull out the intersectional complexity of what the map of America is now, we could then think about how rich, what the diversity bonus, as Scott Page always says, how rich the group problem solving can be. I mean, how much closer we could get to solving climate change, or to solving poverty and inequality, or to solving what it means to have a really good K-12 education system. All the things, what it means to talk to each other across boundaries. That's what our students are about. But they need to be in environments that allow for that, that nurture that, that glorify that, if you will, that celebrate it. They need to be in classrooms and out of classrooms where the sense that they could cross boundaries in their voices, in what they bring to the table, is as crucial as what they remember from a textbook. And what ACUE is doing is it's really empowering our students by empowering our faculty to be able, in all kinds of nuanced ways, to bring out their voices, to feel safe, to create an intergroup environment where the whole is more than the sum of the parts.
I think that was beautifully stated, and I'll turn it to
our students.
Oops.
It's okay.
Turn it to Penny if you have any closing remarks, Penny, and then we'll open it to questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mary. It occurred to me as both of you were speaking that, essentially when institutions that we work with support teachers in learning evidence-based teaching practices, which we now understand, when done with intentionality, are inclusive practices that essentially, where the most students are spending most of their time, they would have that opportunity to feel like they belong, to feel like they are college, university material, understanding structure, struggle in learning, understanding that that's natural. What better place than with faculty in online courses and in our classrooms? So I'm really appreciative of the work Meghan's team and then Mary's, the independent reviewers did to show that the work that we've done to create those quality courses has actually resulted in data. And I urge all of the folks here in the audience to please take a look at that data and think about if you haven't already been working to help your instructors learn those evidence-based practices that are so powerful. I see we have a couple of questions, so I'll kind of pose them and have us all engage. The first, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but essentially is asking about this idea that faculty development is much more of a kind of proactive strategy than a reactive strategy to some of the goals that universities and colleges are putting in place. So I wonder if Meghan or Mary might want to speak to that kind of proactive versus reactiveness.
I can get us started, Meghan, and then you can jump in. I mean, I think and I hope if you have a teaching center or a unit on campus that supports faculty development, I always try to think of faculty development as an opportunity, as opportunity-based versus remediation. You know, you're not going to the woodshed to get whipped for bad teaching. This is an opportunity to grow and develop. And I also try to think about what are the low-hanging fruit, because we don't have, massive resources to thank faculty and appreciate faculty for doing this work. But I find small things like a small incentive to take a course. And sometimes that can be as much as a note when one has concluded it from the provost or a dean, an acknowledgement in a public departmental meeting. ACUE has, because I'm in a group that's doing micro-credentials so that you can take a series of courses, and every time you finish a module, you get a kind of a little certificate, acknowledgement that you've worked your way through, and at the end of the course, you get a certificate that can be put into a personnel file. That I have actually done this course on creating inclusive classroom environments or creating lifelong learners, which is the course I'm in, critical thinkers and lifelong learners. So I think there are some low-hanging fruits that you can use to incentivize faculty to do this. And of course, there's some higher hanging fruits, which are promotion and tenure policies and annual reviews. And if there are places where people can say, I took some risks, I worked to improve my teaching, I tried out these practices, and describe that in an annual faculty review or a teaching dossier, all the better, especially if that is rewarded in the system. And I was just talking to some faculty at a community college actually yesterday who were commenting on how many certificates their faculty were putting into their personnel files for annual review to demonstrate that they were trying to grow and develop as teachers. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get people to improve, to engage, and grow.
Yeah. I'll add, Mary Deane, that what you were just talking about, all the ways that the institutions may kind of intrinsically reward that it's valuable, that it's something on the culture of the campus is valuable to us. We also, in addition to measuring kind of what we've shared, do a lot of research internally about what helps faculty be most successful. And that's consistently something that comes up. So they're kind of the way that the campus prioritizes instruction and kind of valuing their work on their craft really is most motivating to them in kind of having a successful course experience. And then the other thing is a little bit of going back to this kind of proactive, reactive. I think probably the largest and most unexpected example might be the spring. And so I shared the slide about faculty feeling more confident in their efficacy kind of, we all know all of that research on self-efficacy really, you're kind of more resilient, and you're able to kind of take on challenges and try things and adjust and be a little bit more flexible. And, when more did faculty need to be resilient and flexible than in the spring when kind of all the campuses were shutting down? And anecdotally, many faculty were sharing that they felt more confident, that they kept more of their students because they were more connected to them in the beginning of the semester. And so kind of helping them transition through that, just ways to think about supporting them differently in their new environment. And so they really had more tools than anticipated doing, in supporting their students, even during that kind of time of turmoil. So I think building up their skill set and their confidence just works for unexpected challenges, kind of to that proactive point.
Yeah, and can I add too, I think faculty really feel a need to be appreciated, especially having gone to remote and flipped all of their teaching and learning. Just a brief story, as director of the Center for Teaching, I started a policy of every year I would write a personal note to everybody who won a college or distinguished teaching award, which were the bulk of teaching awards on our campus. And more than once, actually several times, people wrote back to me or emailed me and said, "You're the only person who acknowledged this achievement. I didn't hear from my colleagues or my chair or my dean." And certainly this is a place where we can all begin. And I thought how striking that just a personal note made people feel more appreciated. And so if we can think, confidence is critical, but I think appreciation of the work that faculty are doing. It doesn't take a lot of incentives to write that note or get appreciation at a department meeting, as we mentioned before. So I think there are lots of ways to support opportunity versus remediation in the work that ACUE does.
Those were terrific responses. I concur. We've heard from numerous course takers how appreciative they are. The president came to the launch, or the provost was at. We have a pinning ceremony to kind of celebrate faculty as they complete their courses and gain the credential. So yeah, sometimes it's the small things, right, that mean the most to us. So we have another question. Meghan, I know you want to dig into this one. Is there data that evaluates the work across disciplines?
Yes. So in short, all of the data evaluates the impact across disciplines, because the most common way that cohorts are built to participate in the ACUE courses are from across departments, colleges, within a university. It is very rare that they're homogeneous cohorts. So when we're measuring the impact, I would say we're not recruiting people to the evaluation. We're just evaluating who's been recruited to the cohort. So it's 99% of the time really a varied mixture of faculty teaching health sciences and the humanities, first year experience, some graduate courses, and we keep them all together in all of the evaluations. And similarly, it's different kinds of faculty. So most often there are adjunct faculty with tenure track faculty and tenured faculty. We describe the samples in our papers, kind of study by study, but really we've evaluated the impact on courses from, I would say, every discipline, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, public, across, geographically across the country. And so it's all from all disciplines, I guess, is the answer.
So Meghan, somebody followed up on the same question and said, so data is lumped together. How is performance by discipline? Do you see improvements in one discipline higher or lower than others?
So we do not disaggregate by discipline, and this isn't really the question, but I'll add, we're also not studying specific practices. So really what we're evaluating is the impact that this experience has had on teaching. As faculty move through the courses, like I said, they have options of which practices they choose to try out and which they might want to try in the future. And we're not accounting for that in the evaluation. We're not checking that they did certain things or which practices they tried. So really the results can be interpreted as the effect of a course in effective strategies where you become a more reflective educator and kind of you're on this path to refining your instruction. Internally, we've looked, to see, do certain disciplines choose the same practices. And at one single institution, we kind of isolated a group of faculty that all taught in the same discipline, were kind of about the same demographically, we're all tenured, and just looked at what they chose from each of the modules to implement. And it was not consistent at all. So there is kind of this maybe natural thought that biology teachers will want to do this, or this is more natural for a chemistry class. And it's not what we found in that instance. And similarly, it's not that we're kind of asking them all to do the same thing. So there's a lot of choice, and it's really just about taking steps to try new things that we know will work. There's a lot of ways you can make your discussion more engaging. Try one of them, see how it goes, make adjustments. And that's really where I think we're picking up the impact from, just kind of that journey of becoming a more effective instructor, a more intentional instructor.
I think it's also helpful to mention again that our courses are aligned to a framework, and that framework identifies the core set of knowledge and skills you need to be effective in the college level classroom. And we have found that you saw our data on relevance and how helpful it is to improve teaching. We see that across veteran faculty, new faculty, adjunct faculty, and I think we see that because faculty are generally not prepared to teach. And so in order to get the kinds of results we're getting, I think all faculty need that foundation in teaching and learning from which they build. We don't teach everything under the sun about teaching and learning, but the important piece here is that the course is a foundation. So we address course design, learning environment, active learning, higher order thinking, assessment to inform instruction. All of those areas are effectively addressed by multiple modules so that faculty do get that, like I said, solid foundation. We have a comment that I think we'll enjoy. We require terminal degrees for hiring. Why not formal training in how to teach? And then in Pren's, as long as we can't expect all grad programs to include it in their requirements. Any comments on that idea? Requiring it in the hiring process rather than going to promotion and tenure.
Well, I can share, and then I'm sure Mary Deane, you have some thoughts, but I can share that some institutions we work with do require either specifically participation with the ACUE course, sometimes within a certain number of years of starting at the institution. Sometimes it can be in place of a required professional development hours, so they can use it to fulfill an existing requirement. So there are ways that that some institutions are moving towards requiring it. And then on the graduate student side, there are also some institutions that offer the course to their graduate students, both to reap that benefit of the courses that they will teach as graduate students at the institution, but also as a value to them when they go out into the job market and are looking for kind of their own opportunities. And as consistently high as we see the faculty data, as you've seen, nothing beats the graduate student data. Those confidence bars will go from less than 10%, sometimes 0% feeling confident with these strategies, north of 90%. I mean, the learning, the value that graduate students take from it is really unparalleled as thinking of them as a subgroup. So I think the early engagement with this idea of becoming a more effective instructor, early career, is valuable to them. They enjoy it, and certainly there's value throughout your entire career, but I think that is something that they very positively respond to.
Thank you, Meghan. And I'll just follow up by saying we're not there yet. If you look at Europe, Australia, many other continents certainly have required professional faculty development, particularly for new hires, as Meghan said. I am seeing more around campuses that I visit, more talk about building it into TA development for new faculty, encouraging it and new faculty orientation. You know, I think the thought has always been it should be voluntary to professionally learn. But when you look at the kind of data and you look at the change in the student bodies, the shift in student bodies that we're facing in the future, I think we do need to put a bit more muscle into the preparation of teachers for teaching. I can tell you, I've led many new faculty orientations where I asked, how many of you have prior experience in teaching? And I'd always be startled, because I live in a teaching world, how many raised their hand that they had none. And so we have work to do. I am seeing more, and Penny and Meghan, you probably are seeing this too, where in the hiring process, a lot of departments are now asking for a talk on teaching or a statement of philosophy on teaching. Or going into a classroom and doing a demo with a group of students on something that you're interested in teaching. So we are beginning to see a shift, but we're not there in terms of requirement. And I have mixed feelings about that, but I think the more we can encourage it in the graduate student and early career, it's going to be a benefit to our institutions, no doubt about it.
You know, from my experience as a student, when I was a student, they really did say, look to your left and look to your right, and half of you won't be here. And they were really proud of that. That's a 50% graduation rate. And we've changed our tune, thank goodness, right? We're like, no, we need more students to graduate ready for the kinds of careers that are demanded in this 21st century. And I'm proud of that, but I think therein lies the need to change, right? Maybe when we only wanted half of our students to graduate, having faculty that were discipline experts, but really weren't prepared to teach effectively was okay. But I think now that we want our students to graduate at higher levels, probably even more prepared than ever, for careers that require more critical thinking, ability to work in teams, et cetera. Maybe it's that time, right? To say to ourselves, we need to change. We need to really talk to graduate programs. If you're preparing folks to be professors, faculty, one of the jobs that they have is teaching. And it might be time to think about it differently, We do have another question on diversity, inclusion, and equity specifically. So our foundational course is chock full of effective evidence-based practices that are at the same time inclusive practices, especially as we noted, when done with that intentionality, right? To create an inclusive environment, to make learning opportunities more equitable. In addition, we will be releasing in the spring, I don't want to say an exact time frame, but somewhere after March, a course, a micro-credential that focuses squarely on specific issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, implicit bias, stereotype threat, microaggressions, more specifics around designing your course to be inclusive, to promote those equitable learning opportunities and the environment. We do think that going deeply into those areas is important to reach many of the student success goals that you've shared that you have and that we know are out there, both improved retention, graduation, persistence, as well as closing those institutional equity gaps that need not exist any longer. But faculty need the support. As Mary noted, I think all of us need that extra support in diversity, equity, inclusion topics. And I think, oh gosh, wow, 1 minute to go. Go team. We are heading to 2 o'clock. So I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank our panelists, Mary, Deane, and Meghan, and thank the audience and the questions, and hope that the rest of the conference sessions go well for you. Take care.
Yes. Thank you all.